Hello, I am Ada Babineaux, the founder and director of the San Antonio Black International Film Festival, and we are so excited. So we've been presenting panels, and you've been hearing great discussions. If you're local here in San Antonio, you've gotten to sit in on some workshops and see some films in competition. So this is our third day running, and we are not slowing down. We have an amazing group coming up next of creatives. And they are all artists in their own right. They are actually the first Black-owned concept art studio. And we're gonna get into what that is, because y'all are looking like, what is that? But some of the things that they do, you're gonna be like, wow. So let me, without further ado, bring in everybody to the live stream. Welcome, 9B Collective.
What's happening? Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, we have Mike. Is it Uwandi or is it U silent?
Uwandi.
Uwandi. So I should have asked you that before I even got on live. And Aldis Hodge, old man Hodge.
Old man.
Is it Phillip Boutte?
Boutte.
Boutte.
Yeah, if it's not funny, you're not saying it right.
So welcome, gentlemen of 9B Collective. First of all, what is 9B? What is 9B? What is the significance of the name? Where did that come from?
Mike.
So 9B is essentially, our company, but we named it after a pencil, aka the darkest pencil. We were kind of being sly with words there. It's one of the darkest pencils that's also one of the hardest to master. It's extremely pliable, so it can go from light to dark. It can do whatever you need. It's pretty much the hardest tool out of all the pencils, but it's one of the hardest to use. So we kind of named it after that company. We named our company after that because of the flexibility and how well we are masters of our craft and how we push for that level. So we really wanted to kind of dive into that and also allow ourselves to kind of be sly with our verbiage. It's always a funny question when people ask and they're always kind of like thrown off and they're like, "Oh, you mean the dark pencils?" Like, yeah.
like how the hell did you come up with the pencils? That right there just blows me away. Like, seriously, a pencil.
It's the tool we use the most. So it's the tool we all, literally the three of us have started with, and it's the tool that we continue to use. At the end of the day, foundationally, pencil is king, so that's what we named it from.
Okay. Mind-boggling. I was like, 9B. Mm-hmm. I got it. You can tell I'm not a pencil girl. I'm into markers. So I want to for me, it's really important for people to know your journeys. Okay, I want to get into what the concept studio and all that is in a minute. But let's just start with where you're from, Michael. Where you're from, where all of you are from, how you started your world into the artistic realm. As a kid, wherever you grew up, So let's start with you, Mike.
So I'm Nigerian, but I was raised I spent most of my time in Southern California, South Central specifically. Basically, I've been drawing since I was a kid, since I can remember, dabbling in every medium possible. And because I grew up where I grew up, I started to realize at the time that people were not fans of artists. So I kind of started to hide that talent a little bit around like the age of 14 and actually stopped drawing for 10 years. Also with that, my dad, who is Nigerian, like I said, was very hard on the pressure with becoming a doctor.
Yes, doctor, lawyer, yes.
You have no choice. So basically he gave me those three options and I was like, I guess doctor it is. And so I was making my way through that program until luckily my mom kind of slid in there and was just so like, yeah, you're good at this, but art is what you really do. I wish you would go back to that. And prior to that, I had a lot of people who would just say, I wish you got back into art. And, I was just kind of like, no, I left that behind. And eventually I was seeing someone who had a painting on her wall and she was like, oh yeah, I did that. And I was like, oh yeah, I used to do that too. And she was like, really? Why'd you stop? And I was like, oh, well, it's not really cool where I'm from. And, my dad and pressure and stuff like that. And so her first gift to me the next day was to buy me an art book, a sketchbook, and a pencil. And I was addicted, so addicted that we broke up. You think I'm exaggerating, but there's no exaggeration. Like literally, she was like, I didn't know that this would go this far. Like I was in the car, I was only out there for like a week, and I was just drawing. And so luckily, I had some really good friends who saw the passion kind of reignited, who've known me since I was like in 7th grade, and they were like, "We're getting you into art school." So they actually found an art school for me, and then I secretly applied. Me and my mom were like doing the Mission Impossible, and then the day before I left, I told my dad like, "Hey, so I'm leaving the art school," and he threw a fit until he was like, "All right, you have my blessing, but make sure you become one of the best." And then that was it. So I kind of had that like battery in my back ever since, and it's been a blessing.
Thank you, mommy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Talent. Okay, let's go. Phil, what about you? What's your journey?
For me, I started in entertainment. I kind of have a roundabout way of where I got.
Well, turn your mic up a little bit more for me.
Let me see.
Okay.
So sorry.
Say it with your chest.
Let me see. Hold on. Is this better?
Okay, yeah, a little better. No, now you turn yourself off. Okay.
No. I'm good. I'm here. I think I just have to get closer to the mic. I started my journey actually a little roundabout way. I was an actor from about 3 until like 16, 17, somewhere in there. That's how I met Aldis. And I kind of like my formative years were all spent doing that. And what I ended up kind of getting out of it was I had a really great experience. I made a lot of great friends, a lot of contacts. I enjoyed being able to, learn new things like, oh, you're horseback riding this week, and then you're playing tennis this week. And it was a whole bunch of different things to kind of like get myself, acclimated into entertainment. So I grew up with the love of that. But why I stopped was because when I started to be old enough to drive myself to my audition, right? So 16, 17, somewhere around there, I'd get off of school, I'd go to my audition, and every audition I started to notice had a theme. It was the same, which was every Black male that I was presenting on television was negative. So they were all gang members or drug dealers or something like that, right? And like everyone was like, oh, was it? It was like, yeah, it's a challenge because that's not obviously me. But I was like, I can't continue to keep playing the same person over and over and over again. I mean, I got frustrated because, both of my parents are UCLA graduates. Like we were upper middle class. Like I didn't have that experience. It's like I very much so had an experience that wasn't being shown to me on television besides something like The Cosby Show. We can't keep depending on The Cosby Show for years and years and years to be the only beacon of like showing, the Black household together, thriving, successful, that type of deal. Mm-hmm. So long story short, that led me to going to school. And what I wanted to go to school for was the only other thing that I did. I would draw all the time. So when I was in my trailer, I'd be drawing. When I met Aldis, I was drawing. Like it was just drawing all the time, right? So that's the only other thing that I really felt like I could, put my energy into. And so when I went to Cal State Long Beach, I combined illustration with film, and I started to production design, which is like designing sets and, designing the film and everything like that. So I started doing that first. So by the time I got out of school, I was well-versed in being able to do that. And then I went to Comic-Con on the off chance of just graduating and looking for work. And I was showing my illustration portfolio. And I ran into a panel of costume designers that were there from the Costume Designers Guild. So I showed them my portfolio with a couple of friends. They were all showing their portfolios as well. Well, that next week, my friend Oksana got a call from costume designer Isis Musenden, who did Narnia. And she said, hey, I really liked your portfolio. How would you like to go to Prague for 9 months and do Narnia 2 with me? Right? So this is like right out of school. We had just graduated. And I'm like, wow, that's a real good opportunity. So I had considered it. I kind of put it in the back of my head. And then I joined later that year, which was 2006. And I got my first job at the beginning of 2007, which was the Mummy 3. And then from there, I continued and I've been drawing ever since.
The last name, Boutte? I can't remember.
Oh, Boutte.
Boutte. I always mess up. What's your background? Where are you from?
Born and raised here, but my parents are from Louisiana and Texas. So Boutte comes from Louisiana.
Louisiana. Okay, that's
yeah.
like Babineaux.
Yeah, it's like full-blown Louisiana purchase. That's
What part?
Baton Rouge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Opelousas.
Nah.
In the house. Mama got some gumbo on the stove now, child.
I always think about, whenever I think about Louisiana, I think about my cousins and their thick accents where I can like barely understand them for a week. And I got it. And I think about gators in the back, and then there's gumbo, and my dad's aunt makes pecan brittle. So I always imagine the house smelling like pecan brittle.
Oh man, I like the popcorn balls on a rainy day.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I want to move to Aldis. What about you? What's your journey, man?
Yeah, so I was raised in New York and Jersey. I was an actor. Started at 3. Still am an actor. And throughout my time, I've always been an artist. I was very socially awkward, so art was my means of communication. It was where I was comfortable, drawing, painting, or whatever. I started painting really to make Mother's Day gifts for my mama because I couldn't afford nothing. So kind of really fell in love with that. Met Phil. I was probably like 11 or something like that, 11 or 12. And I keep, I tell this all the time. Phil was the very first person that gave me an actual art lesson. And, speaking of our name 9B and the gradients, he's the one who taught me about not putting down hard lines when you're drawing. You know what I'm saying? Being a little softer so you can go and correct, go back over your work and correct things, right? So, but yeah, I've been in the business for a long time, still loving art. And then when the idea of 9B came along and Phil hit me to it, it was sort of a cohesion of things that I found to be great, but all in love, but also saw a sort of a monopoly of opportunity there, because as an actor, I experienced what Phil also experienced. We're going out and having to fight for roles that define Black culture in its truth and not in the ill-fated perspective of people who are culturally negligent, people who don't know what Black people actually, we come from, many variations. There is that street life, of course, yes, but that is the one small monicum of what defines us. We have so many other colors and facets, and there is so much brilliance and eloquence and art and academia tied to our culture and what we are, what we do, and what we've contributed to the world over. What most people know that comes from a lot of Black people we don't get credit for, right? So I wanted to represent that, and you got to stick it out. You got to fight in different ways, and sometimes you got to starve and sacrifice. So when it came to the acting, it was not an easy road. But my pursuit was to put myself in a position, to create opportunities that were not generally there for me as a kid. As an artist, I was always very fervently tied to art because it was the thing that gave me the most joy, was creating. I attended Art Center College of Design for a hot second. I was there for product design, conceptual design, things like that. So I was doing whatever. I was doing like cars and houses. Architecture was my thing. I used to intern at an architecture firm when I was like 13 to 15. So that's really where my love kind of sat, was just design. And coming out of that, I started getting into horology, watch design. So I'm a watch designer as well. Started that path when I was like 19, 20, and still also doing that. But as far as art goes and how it ties to the industry, and sort of the deficit of opportunities that are not there for people who really, really need and deserve it, that kind of plays into the value and the quality of what we do when it comes to the industry. On the back end of producing what we produce, showing things how we show them. And as you can imagine, as an actor or a producer, I step on set and I see things that just don't look right or don't feel right. And it starts, everybody they think about the writing. The writing is pivotal, but it also goes into the art direction. And that's a super important, part of the process that doesn't really get as much acknowledgement as it should. Mm-hmm. So when Phil told me about this idea and then introduced me to Mike, and, they both work at super high levels, very formidable artists, and really at the forefront of what they do, at the pinnacle of what they do. It just made sense, you know, and, you know, we came to this company with a great deal of passion, not for ourselves, but for the future of what we can hopefully provide for other artists in the space of what we do, and really change perspective when people think about it.
Oh my goodness! I didn't mean to take you out. I didn't mean to take you out of the screen. I really didn't. I'm sorry. What I wanted to say is, thank you for that. I didn't mean to. Live TV, yeah. So, what I think is that, you know, just you two, I do not know you, but the pictures I saw, you all seem so free. The pictures I've seen, it's like, y'all seem so free. It's just like, I think divine intervention brings people together. Yeah. And so you said that you know they brought you into the fold, but how did you all come together as a unit from Mike's initial idea? I mean, I'm sure you went to you were on a lot of sets, acting, whatever, and you're like sitting there directing shit in your mind, like that should be going a certain way, and you don't feel like it's going a certain way, or the set design, you're like, So, I mean, how did it come together where you all put your talents and energy into play to create 9B Collective?
It was pretty, I'd say it was pretty natural.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, no, I was just saying, it actually was kind of crazy on my end. Yeah. I'm like, it wasn't natural at all. But I
real story.
I don't know why I'm getting feedback from you. Your voice is louder. I'm getting kind of like a feedback.
Mine's or Phil?
Go ahead.
It's all the bass in your voice.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. So at least from my end, it was kind of funny because Phil has been in the industry for a while. And I've always like kind of saw him as like that dude, right? Like he's the first kind of Black concept artist who was like really moving in that space. And you know, for me, I was like, there's no way I can reach out to this guy because I'm I'm a shy dude, oddly enough. And so I was like, so I'll just kind of like see him every once in a while, like online, or even like hear about him teaching at Art Center while I was there. And I was like, what? How'd I miss this guy? And then, you know, eventually there was a mutual friend who kind of connected us. But even then we wouldn't see each other or talk to each other that often. And with Aldis, funny enough, everyone knows I'm like the worst person when it comes to like actors and actresses. Like literally you can show me someone today and I will forget them like 2 seconds later. I don't know what that is, but it just is a thing. And I was listening to an interview where like Aldis was just kind of playing in the background and he mentioned Art Center. So it made me like tune in, and then he started talking about design and stuff like that. And I like looked and I was like, oh, that's a brother. Like I was kind of shocked. And then he was like, you mentioned Art Center. I was like typing in. I was like, he must be in a different Art Center because I don't remember no Black people going to Art Center. I was like, the way he carried it, the way he was speaking, I was like, I actually like this guy. And I legit was like, I'm going to work with this guy someday. And I saved it in a folder. And then years later, like maybe like a year later, actually, I'm like, you know, grouping up with Phil and he's talking about the company and stuff like that. And me and Aldis had talked like 2 times already. And I was like, hey, what's your friend's name? And he was like, oh, Aldis. And I was like, Aldis what? And I was like, why does it sound familiar? And he was like, Aldis Hodge? And I was like, that sounds familiar. And I'm like trying to rack my brain. And I got the folder and it's him. And I was like, oh, like, it was just crazy. Like from my end, it was like kind of hilarious to kind of see that kind of link up
and it came together.
Yeah. I remember Phil hit me about the idea for this company.
Talk louder. I can't hear you well. I don't know if it's just
hello,
me.
I'm here. Hello, you got me? Okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Go ahead, Aldis.
So Phil told me about the idea for the company and really sort of what inspired it for him, and I definitely dug into it. And I remember it was just, I think we just had it was just a conversation. Hey, you know, I got this idea, and then I remember I think I was on a hike and I called Phil one day because it was hot as God knows what. But I was like, yo, man, what's up with that idea, bruh? Like, what's going on with it? Let's get it popping. So then that's when he introduced me to Mike, and I was like, no, because of the work, and I was like, okay, this brother's serious, you know what I'm saying? Like super high level, and then we found out we had the Art Center connect, and that was kind of crazy because we both had similar experiences of being in our classes, being the only ones there, and it was interesting. We'll say that, but yeah, but I actually still have my old assignment tucked over there somewhere all these years. But
your old assignment.
Yeah, my old assignment from Art Center, one of my old projects, but we ain't gonna pull that out the box.
Yeah.
Oh, that's history, man. That's special. You gotta.
That's history. I keeps it, keeps it all. It's one thing I always heard is never erase your work, never throw your work away. You can always go back, look at something from a couple of years ago that can inspire something new. You know what I mean? I've done that as just in conceptual design and product design. I looked at something a few years ago. I'm like, man, this is where we need to go with it. So yeah, just Phil really was the initial glue, and I'll let him get into telling you how he became the glue and how he came up with the idea. But yeah, that's really where the sort of the triumvirate was founded.
We did a drink and draw with the Concept Art Association in 2020. So it was a drink and draw where artists come together. They're in a bar setting that we have models that are dressed up, right? And then the artists sit and they kind of draw and paint and commune and talk to each other and have bar food and wine or drinks or whatever. So there was a whole, specifically the Concept Art Association does these every month, but this one was for Black History Month. Yeah. So they said, we would like it if you could sponsor this or if you guys could put it together. So we actually hired the Jackson Agency, which is a Black-owned talent agency that got us 2 models, male and female. And then we were in a place in Little Tokyo in downtown LA called the Bar Bar. And what was historic about this moment was it was the highest attended event that they had ever had. So it was
during COVID? During COVID?
Right before. So it's February, remember?
Oh, okay.
This is right before. So it was maxed out to capacity. I think it was 150 was capacity. And then we had a line out the door. There were directors, producers, artists, Art Station, DeviantArt, all these different people that had come to see this event. I mean, we even had some people that had traveled in from San Diego and out of state, right? So it was a huge event. And what we noticed was it was the most Black artists I had ever seen in one place. As far as even just in LA, all of them were there. So it was directors, producers, it was animators, video game, live action, you name it. They're all there.
But how did they know about it to come? I mean, it
was just promotion through the Concept Art Association. They were saying we're having a drink and draw, special one, Black History Month. We themed it Afrofuturism, Afropunk. So it had a whole vibe to it and it was really cool, right? And so you start housekeeping. And the reason why the company kind of started in the way it did was just kind of kismet. It was a few different things. That night, when I would talk to artists, they all had the same story. I work at a video game company. There's 400 employees. There's only 2 Black people, and we never get to work together, out of that entire company, right? So all of the artists had a similar thing, and then that made me think about myself. So I started my career in 2007, and 2019 was the first time I ever sat next to another Black artist. So that was that whole time. Not to say that they didn't exist, but I usually would work with an artist or 2 at a time. There'd usually be 3 on a big movie, right?
Wow.
First time I ever had an opportunity to work with another Black artist was 2019. So that made me think about it. And I was so we're all out here. We're just all spread out and we're all at separate places and, operating at a high level or at the highest of the levels that we can be in with all the films and stuff. But we just feel isolated because we're not together. So the first thing we thought was talk to Aldis, talk to Mike, let's unify and maybe start doing more of these, right? So that was the thing. And then, of course, March 2020, pandemic. Everything shut down. So no drink and draws, nothing in person. And that kind of was a buzzkill until we realized that it actually was a motivator to open it up and to think bigger. So that's what we did. We thought bigger. We thought, let's open it up worldwide. Let's just see if we can find artists of color. Let's see if we can diversify behind the scenes to make sure that everybody feels included And the biggest part about that was then also going back and saying, let's fix the pipeline of education to make sure that we're creating more artists of color earlier, because everyone likes to go back to high school. We wanted to go back to, elementary school and below. So you can also tell the parents, which I'll let Mike talk about. And there was also the thought process of diversifying within the film space between film, animation, video games, and making sure that not only did they hire those artists, but that they could work together and that they were given positions of power, meaning that they could actually make decisions or use their voice or speak up and not just be hired based on a visual or like a quota, but to actually be like, we're putting you in a position to where you can make change.
Wow. So do y'all have any more of those drink and draw sessions? Those happy hour sessions? You still keep that going? Is that a recruiting tactic?
To a degree, it's more just fun for us, and also to activate our membership, like the people that have joined or wanted to join. It's a way to make sure that we're giving back and allowing that to happen as well, and also just community.
Community is the biggest big thing about it. Yeah.
Is that virtual now, or that's just in LA proper?
Both. We do.
Okay,
so
what's the virtual space of that? I want to put it out there.
Just Zoom. So we normally, if you go to our Instagram, which is was it at 9B Collective, and it's the number 9, so 9B Collective. On IG, we normally will put some kind of thing. We actually have one up right now because we're going to have one in October at an event called Lightbox. So that'll be our next drink and draw. But we normally will put it on there. So that's a good way to do it. And we've done them in person, where we have it in person and we're live streaming it at the same time. So we've had people join virtually. We've had people come in person.
Okay, I was going to put that up. I was trying to hurry and put that up while you were talking. So I want to go back a little, because I had asked, when I was, trying to get you all to be on, and you all are so gracious, because I know you're busy as heck. But one of the things I asked is for a reel. But when I got this reel, I was like, God damn. I mean, like, go big or go home, basically. You all went big. I want to show the reel, not the whole thing, but just I want to show the reel, because I want to set this up to go into what is an art collective, concept. What is a concept studio art? I mean, what is that? What do people like? They don't know. Like I never heard of it. The concept.
Yeah.
Studio. So that's
I
want to just show this and then go. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna explain it, but show the clip and then we can
show the clip
a little bit, because it's like.
Yeah.
Give me away.
Roll that footage.
Here you go.
Outstanding. You're lost.
Pants.
Oh, you goddamn right. I want to be counted. Do that shit. Do that shit. Do it. I say when I die. Or was that a threat?
some of us could be killed. Welcome back.
Boom.
So I saw, just a layman. I mean, I'm a documentary filmmaker, but just a layman. I saw art design, illustration, makeup, costuming, set design. I don't know, props maybe. I don't know. Damn, y'all do it all. You all do. So can you all break down for me and for our audience concept studio? Somebody comes to you. Like, who comes to you? Directors? I mean, who comes to you? How what do you do for people to make their concept a reality?
Really, it could be anybody in any particular stage of where they are developing a project. So we are a conceptual art studio that handles work for live action, animation, video games, illustrations, for, book literature, things like that. We do it all, right? So, for instance, I think Phil put it the most simple way possible one time, where it's like if a big film studio comes to us and says, "Hey, look, we have this idea. This is, Lord of the Rings, 6, 7, 8. You know what I mean? And we want to know how the world looks. We want to know what the characters look like, what they're wearing. We want to understand, what are the themes." So a conceptual art studio is going to design everything based on the story or based on the script that's provided. We design everything, the look, the aesthetic, the props, all of that. And then we go back and forth working with said studio or client just to get the look right. And then from there, our work transitions to, art directors or a set deck. We transition to set deck or prop design or costume designer to actually fabricate and make real everything that we've designed. And then at times, like Bill will jump on with the costume department to actually help fabricate. Phil and Mike will sit there and they'll art direct just to make sure that there's a streamline of consistency with the look throughout the entire process. But basically, just like before you see an actor, it starts with the script. Before you see any film, before you see any effects, any of that, it starts with the art. And that's what we provide, to kick off a project.
So you're in the research and development phase, not even in the pre-production phase. You're in research and development. You're developing, putting the architectural plans into work before you even go into pre-production.
We're at the first stage. We're the very first stage of like when you're trying to figure out what this thing is, what it looks like, what the design is, all of that stuff. It's the world building aspect. So it's very early on, and that can last all the way through production as long as there's stuff to design and draw and manufacture. And we have done that on one of our most recent projects.
Even those after production.
Yes.
Other areas, we can come in at any stage. But yeah, we're first in, last out.
Last out?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Last out in terms of breaking everything down. If you have a set, you mean like that?
Oh,
or,
no.
or talk about the editing process.
Of,
last out.
Like carrying the lifespan of a project through its entirety from, creating it, filming it. You may have things that need to be changed or altered. So we'll come hit the, conceptual team and say, look, we need to redesign this thing, or we need reshoot. So we need to redesign this vehicle, boom. And then after that, when the film comes out, there may be other things that are attached to the film on the marketing side of merchandising or whatever, and things like that, for, again, consistency and keeping that design language the same. They'll come deal with us because we provide all of the services. Because when we go onto a project, it really is because we believe in the project and it's about passion. And we go on not necessarily for, let's just take a quick job here. And it's because we want to stay with the lifespan of the job through its entirety to see it all the way through. Because, that's our name on it, just like anything else. And we're proud of our work. And we want to make sure that we take care of our work, which means taking care of the project and taking care of our client.
So in terms of, I'm looking at the reel, in terms of Black Panther? Give me a for instance. What was your input? Was it designing the costume? Because they had a costume designer. So how does that work in together?
So Black Panther, that was my part of the reel. I worked with costume designer Ruth Carter, who won an Oscar for Black Panther, which was awesome. That part of the reel is primarily, yes, I did, conceptually work and design with Ruth and kind of worked on different costumes and stuff like that throughout the process of that entire film. So like when we get hired, especially as an artist, right? So that was an individual job for me. That was pre-90, right? Mm-hmm. So I get hired often by costume designers to help them flesh out ideas or to think about things or to design whatever the breadth of that world is. And in costumes specifically, especially for specialty, there's a lot of design work to do, right? So you're sitting there and you're kind of going back and forth. It really is a collaborative process. Ruth was very open to collaboration in terms of going back and forth, showing me a bunch of reference from stuff because she had redone Roots. So she had just gone to Africa and she had all of this knowledge, or she had all of this research, at least, right? Research of different tribes. So for me, it was the first time that I felt, and I've talked to Mike about this a lot, because as an African American, I feel disjointed from Africa, right? I don't understand it. It was the first time that I had interacted with Africa in a way to where I was retaining information. And it wasn't just something where I was looking at it as, it was like, I know that name of that tribe. I know why they put that in their hair. I know why it's made out of that. I know what the color of the beads is. I know why. It was a very kind of learning. It was an eye-opening experience for me. But that's kind of what our process is to go in and we work with the creatives, that be so that's director, production designer, costume designer, prop master. We're working with them to creatively help them flesh out the ideas and kind of move the design, needle forward, basically.
It's so interesting because we don't hear about y'all.
Right.
Correct.
We hear about Ruth Carter. We hear about, whoever. It's like, we don't hear about y'all. So
We're pretty hidden. We're pretty hidden. It's a hidden job that we want actually more kids to know about because it's a lucrative job.
It's a very lucrative job.
It's really great. And, support your family. You can travel. You can do all kinds of stuff with it,
And it's something that we definitely want to push, more within the culture as well, because one of the big things is, you say draw, and people assume that you want to sell big paintings in a gallery, or you want to animate something, right? Or maybe even you want to do comic books. But those things compared to what we do, there's a lot more control with what we do. It's a lot more lucrative as well. And it's something that most parents are unaware of, as well as children. I didn't know that this existed when I was a kid at all. I was doing something completely different. I was just making up stories and drawing them. And then I would, my brother would dress really cool, and then he'd put it on me to do that. And then I ended up finding out that this was an actual route. And when I found out, oh, wait, there's this much money, there's this much influence in this job. Well, us as a culture, we naturally influence the rest of the world. But why is there not more of us working in the industry that influences the masses, right? So it's one of those things that we've recognized as a company. We also wanted to really help educate people, as well as parents, as well as students, that this is a great outlet creatively. And it's a challenging one, which is in a good way, and it can span from whether you're doing furniture design to costume design to whatever type of art you're into, there's a pocket in the concept art realm for your respective art.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, I really want to know this. Is your father happy that you're not a doctor?
He is now. That's a great question. Yeah. The first time my dad is very hard to please, as I feel, and I always know, he's never impressed with anything. But the first time he was actually, I could tell, he didn't say it, but I know my dad well enough, was when he heard that my name was in the credits for the first time. And he was like, "Yes, son, so your name is in the credits, I hear." And I'm like, "Huh?" And he's like, "It says Uwandi." And I'm like, "Uh-huh." And he was like, "I like the sound of that." And then he's like, "So how much are you making a day?" And I told him, He's like, you are what? You know, it did that I was in a week, and he's like all happy and stuff like that. And it was just like kind of funny to hear because, like I said, my dad is like the most. You can do the most amazing thing, and he'll just like kind of just stare at you and just like look past it. But that was like him calling me up to say that. I was like, okay, you're happy. So yeah.
And no
good.
malpractice suits. So no, so I'm just trying to get what I really want to get out there is that this exists because it seems like there's a roadblock in every dimension of every place that we go in production and animation. Well, I can just say life in general. So there always has to be a way around getting into the groove of this. So how do kids early on move in the direction of this, of working with a concept studio or working, because as you said, Phil, you were like, you had never sat down and worked with a Black, which is insane to me.
It was pretty crazy because you notice it. It's the thing, like, I try to put it like this, like, you don't, like, as a Black person, you're aware when you're the only one or when you're like isolated. It's not like it stops your day. It's not like I sit there every day and I'm like, oh my God, I'm by myself. But I did notice it, but not really. Like, I just plowed forward and just tried to do the best job that I could do. And then as people like Mike started to kind of show up, I was like excited. I was like, there's more, like it was really kind of exciting to see. But I'm also not the person that tries to be monolithic. And I'm also not the person that enjoys being the special one. Like, I very much so, like, once you get there, you bring more people with you. And you try to make sure that there's more. And so I think that it was something that I noticed, but also due to the pipeline issues that we were talking about in terms of like not building enough artists early, there's just this weed out process that happens that by the time you get to the level that we're at, you either are, super frustrated, or you're tired, or you've been overlooked all the time, by other people that aren't as talented. It's a thing that we want to try to like to halt and like really kind of put it back into place. And so it's one of those things that I did notice it, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what to do about it, because then even if you're trying to foster new talent, there's all the NDAs, right? Like, we're working on big projects that are super secretive. So it's like, how do I bring someone into that? How do I so there was a lot of barriers, and trying to kind of like do that. And then also inspiring people to just know, like, your kid, if they are interested in being artistic, can do this. One of the stories that I tell a lot is there was a little girl in my neighborhood. She had to have been like 8 at the time, like 8 or 9. And she was playing with my daughter. So she was friends with my daughter. And her parents kind of came to me and they looked all concerned and they were like, our daughter is artistic. And I was like, autistic or artistic? And they're like, artistic. And I'm like, why are you saying it like that? They just said it like it was like an affliction or something. Like, they're like, oh, no, she's artistic. And I was like, okay, what does she like? And they're like, oh, she likes every 6 months or so, she just breaks down her room and completely changes it. She changes the whole thing. She's like, one day she's in the polka dots, the next she's in the stripes or, cow print or whatever it is. And I was like, oh, she's an interior designer. And they're like, what's that? And I literally was like, what do you mean? Like, you've never heard of this term, an interior designer. And that's what, a lot of parents are dealing with. And it's not their fault. It's just, they probably come from a background that's completely outside of art, right? So it's very practical, very functional. It's just not art at all. So once I told them that, I was like, here's a master class from Kelly Wessler, who's a famous, interior designer. Watch that. Look at this. And sure enough, those skills started to progress because she's able to look at it. And that's exactly what she likes doing, right? Wow. So like, imagine a little 9-year-old interior designer. Imagine what she's going to be like even when she's 16. If she continues down this path, she'll be stronger and she can maybe inspire others around her to do it too. So that by the time they get to college level, they're ahead of the curve. They're not behind. Yeah. That's kind of the deal.
Parents recognizing and not swaying away. Like, your mother might recognize, we're gonna go behind dad's back, and someone recognize and champion what you do instead of trying to steer them in another direction.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Because it's really difficult. Like, when it comes, like, the job is difficult on its own, but it's even more difficult when you face some of the prejudices and stuff like that in the industry as a whole, as well as school, things like that, where you're the only one. You might feel a little awkward. You might see, variations of, microaggressions, etc. And sometimes it really just helps to see another person doing it. Like I even
this is so important.
yeah, it's huge. For myself, I remember just doubting whether I could do it, and then I saw another artist who was directing. He was a storyboard artist and became a director. And I remember they said that he came from the hood, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I could do that. That's all I needed. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I know that has to be a real thing for a lot of other people. It's just simply seeing representation, not just in one way, but multiple ways. Said, you don't want to be monolithic. You want to represent different people, different groups, because they get inspired.
But people see us monolithic, though. They see us only through a very thin, narrow lens. And as a Black concept studio, do a lot of other people come to you now based upon your skills and your talent and what you put forth, as opposed to, they're a Black concept studio. It's like a Black film festival. It's like, come on, white people, you can come.
You can come.
They will pick, I go to Italian, German, I go to all kind of film festivals. It don't matter. I'm looking for the story. I'm looking for but it's like it's a very narrow view of what you can do. And so when did you realize and know that you have value, that your value is worth a certain amount? Like, when did you realize that? And was that coming together to realize that?
I think we kind of came together because we know the value. We know the value of our culture. We acknowledge it, recognize it. And there are other people who feed off of the value, but are not willing to, for lack of better metaphor, they're not willing to pay the price for said value, right? Because they haven't had to in some ways. Piggybacking off of what Mike was saying earlier about isolation. Another part of that experience that's really tough is that you are the only one who's isolated in the world around people who are never isolated. So there's no empathy, right? They don't understand or don't even, they don't know how to approach understanding what you're going through because it's fantasy to them, right? So in terms of us being acknowledged as, a Black concept studio, really what it is we are in service to the world, to everyone, for the benefit of those who need it, which is the BIPOC community. That doesn't mean we're blocking anybody out. We have a roster of artists all over the world from every ethnic background, because at the end of the day, that is where the deficit and opportunity lies. There's a lot of people who are coming from, various countries in Africa. There's various countries in the Latin diaspora. There's the Brazil, the Mexico, you know what I mean? The continents all over the world that have people that are not getting the look, and simply because of the fact that no one's paying attention to them based off of who they are, where they are geographically, you know what I mean? And because we understand that experience, our job is to fill up that hole, fill up that void right there. Because the value, not even just monetary when it comes to financial, the value is exponential when it comes to the quality of work produced, when you're talking about people who are representing something on screen from a true standpoint. You're talking about productions that want to make a film based off of, maybe it's like Aztec mythology, right? Or Mayan mythology, right? Well, you're either going to go to Google, Discovery Channel, or you're going to go to people who grew up with that history in their families. That's where the real intrinsic value is, because they're going to give you a much more realized perspective and many more quality options for how to understand and see, and or rather to execute said work, right? So for us, it's more than just about making art, and being able to feed opportunities to our community. It's about feeding truth and representation to the world for what we do and how we do it. Because we have a lot of conversations, and pretty much it's like the first step of our job is cultural consultation. And knowing that, look, we know we don't know it all, right? But we have a wonderful roster of artists who can inform us and tell us, hey, look, this is from this region, this particular tribe or this culture. They would do this. My grandma grew up doing this, da, 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 da. And now you have a wealth of knowledge and options to choose from that can actually help make your story and your product better. As opposed to what happens often, which is, well, this is what we grew up seeing on TV, or this is what I read in the book, so this is what I'm going to do. I don't want to do the research, right? I'm going to go get somebody from that community at a much later stage of development and not give them the right to have a voice on it. Just draw for me, just so I can say, boom, you were here. As opposed to, like Phil said, bringing somebody in early, empowering them to have a voice, to be able to say, this is a cool design, but what would make it better and more authentic is if we shifted the angle of, that scarf from this to this, the length of it from there to here, the design from this to this, right? All those details matter because we are writing the aesthetic script. It's more than, what I'm saying, you got the words, but we're writing the aesthetic script. And it has to be done with honesty. And that's what we hope to provide. So that's where the value is. But because we have been remiss, because we've been in so many of these situations where we see the bulk of our cultural contributions getting eaten up without being cared for, without being taken care of, we know the value of people's desire to have it, to engage it, but we need to be the shepherds. We need to be the caretakers of that. And that is really where the emphasis behind the company comes in. It's about taking care of our artists and taking care of the cultures that we represent with the work.
Wow. Aesthetic script. That is, yeah. So tell me this. Post Floyd.
That was also a big caveat for us.
Did you all, George Floyd, did you all get overwhelmed with people wanting to use a Black art studio more so than before? I'm just wondering was there a shift after that, and how are you all leveling out? Are you overextended right now, or because it's the three of you, but I know you have artists from everywhere. I'm just curious.
This is the best question ever.
Dang.
Yeah.
How much time do you have?
Wow.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, not in relation to the company itself or to the clientele, but in relation to my personal life. 2020 was one of those years where a lot of people woke up to the fact that racism is real, which is disheartening. They're like, oh my God, it's real, it's here. And we're like, where have you been? Like, your whole life. Fam, like, this is a normal reality for us. We live a very different contextual reality of what it means to be in this world, and especially in this country, than many other people, right? So with that, yes, you do see opportunistic approaches. And again, I'll speak at that from just the acting and producing side. And what I say to those people who think they are in allyship, they think they're well-meaning, right? I want to make this movie about this Black this and Black that, and we're fighting the power. Okay, well, first of all, it starts with who did you put in the right seat to have a voice? Because sometimes it is a group that's come together, maybe a group of executives that, just be blatantly honest, in my experience as an actor and producer, not talking about 9B, but as an actor and producer, where the executive staff and the writer, everybody's white. And then you say, well, what real work had you done to create, this world where you want to talk about and have this conversation about racism, and have this conversation about, Black equity, things like that. Because at the end of the day, you're benefiting off of the culture, but are you benefiting for the culture, right? Who are you commoditizing? Are you capitalizing on our experience by commoditizing our pain? And a lot of times people don't realize that that's vulturism, right? Where they are going to take because it's an opportunity, because right now everybody's paying attention to it. We want to make this, this is the hot conversation right now, but we're not a hot, trendy topic. This is real for us. So in our experience, luckily, we have had clients who've come to us and said, look, we want to tell this story, but we don't know how to tell it, and we're not the right ones to tell it. So can you help us? And the move there is, if you're really, really dedicated, right, to your work, share the equity and the power by moving over and letting the right people do the right job. And that's what we deal with. And luckily, you know, our clientele has been really quite amenable in that way. And we like to continue working with people like that because, look, if there's a job that we are not passionate about or that we feel will misrepresent the culture, we're not about it. We have turned down some work because we have morals. But really, it does come down to people understanding that if you're going to put out a perspective, who's on the receiving end of the consequences of said perspective? Because you're not going to live with those consequences if you don't look like it. You know, we will, though. And I'm not trying to lose sleep over nobody. So, you know, yeah, we've had some interesting encounters here and there. And you just got to teach people, like, this is not something, like, our culture is not something to just prey on and make money off of. Like, you got to give back to the culture with whatever you're doing. So how are you spreading that equity with the people that you hire? How are you spreading that equity with the people that you acknowledge on the back end? You know what I'm saying? I got to see some kind of, a few different shades, you know, just because it's needed and necessary. But one of the things that is often ignored at the first shot of trying to put something together, and you're like, how do you know what I'm saying? Like, the real research is in having the people in the room with the right voices. Right.
Man, I'd like to be on one of y'all powwows. I bet y'all be talking some shit behind the scenes. Oh my God.
I gotta say this though. One of the things that we experienced a lot in that initial thing, which is why I was like, we could talk about this all day long too, was a bunch of people trying to, how do you say it? A bunch of people trying to maintain control and power while also realizing that it wasn't their story to tell. So you can tell that, like, you could always see it in the eyes. There's a moment where you could realize that they realize that this isn't particularly your story to tell, but they're the ones that are in charge. So they're kind of trying to give over just enough control to get the project done. But what should actually happen in your morality or in your sense of the greater sense of the world is you should be passing or empowering those people to tell that story. And that's not just Black, that's just across the board. Like, if we're doing a Native American story, I know that that's not my story. So at bare minimum, especially as a good producer, if I'm able to pull the resources together, I want to empower those people to tell their story. I don't want to be like, I'm the top person and my good intentions, which I've said before, your good intentions should never be louder than the voice of the people that are telling the story. So that's kind of the key thing, is like, you can be good intention, but that should never be louder than my experience. So as a Black person, if I'm giving you my experience, your good intentions of trying to do the right thing should never overpower what I'm saying, you know, or overpower that to the point where I feel like I'm not heard or not.
So that's why it's important for you all. You said you're primarily made up of BIPOC artists, which is Black, Indonesians, and people of color artists. So that's why it's very important for you all to have that under the first Black concept studio, but then made up of.
Right.
Yeah, that's critical.
We here for the people.
Out to the people. Yes. No. So when you talk about the lucrative, what type? Just put it out there for kids. What type of ranges are we talking about that kids can make, starting from a entry level, moving on up? What is the range of that you can make as a concept studio artist? And the skills that you would need to have, would they be, because you all are very, very well diverse. Mm-hmm. Is it just illustration, one level of pay? Set design, one level, or how does that break down?
I would say I would try and give a range because it's very difficult. But as a concept artist, like just okay, you know what it is? I'll give you an example based on the union, right? So we're a part of unions, right? So like SAG, Costume Designers Guild, et cetera, right? So those all have a bare minimum, like a base pay, right? Which is called scale, right? So scale pay for an artist now is $51 an hour. That's the bare minimum that you can be paid as an artist.
If you're union. If
you're union, right?
Okay.
So, but I mean, even to a degree, even if you weren't union, yeah, like it's kind of a standard, that's a standard rate, like $50, $60 an hour. So people need to know that that's available. This isn't like you're like, oh, I'm making $20 an hour. You're making $50 an hour just at bare minimum, right? So you can imagine that the more seasoned artists are 90 to 100 plus an hour, right? And we're normally working, we have an 8-hour minimum or 8-hour guarantee. So we can't be paid less than 8 hours, but we normally work 10. So you can do the math at someone making $100 an hour on a 10-hour day and they're working 5 days a week, right? Like that's the type of money you can make as an artist.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I think, was there anything that any advice, we're going to wind it down, that you can give to young people who have a skill that their parents are trying to steer them away from, to stay on course and to develop? I mean, any advice for them to see their way through?
Always follow your passion. Sometimes you may not have the support that you want, but you always got the support you need. There's a community around you. You might have to seek it. You know what I mean? And because we all need community, we all need foundation. But never let anything stop you from your passion, because your passion, that's instinctually, that's God talking to you, saying this is what you're supposed to do, right? There's always a greater value for why we do what it is that we do. You know, we all sitting here start sketching, and then it turns into a company primarily based on providing opportunity, right? We're in service of and in service to, right? To shut down a problem that we all were up against at a young age. So just continue to vehemently follow your passion. Anytime there's a roadblock, you have to understand there's a value to that. There's a value to failure. There's a value to something trying to stop you. That's the universe testing you to see exactly how much you believe in yourself. It's going to make you smarter. It's going to make you tougher. It's going to make you a little bit more vigilant, right? But you always got to know there is a way. There is a pathway. There is nothing that can stop you but you. So allow everything that comes into your life to serve a purpose. I say assign a purpose to your pain. Because I remember when I lost a job one time, I was like 19 or whatever, and it was one of the worst moments of my life. And then I had another job that came through a few months later. It wasn't as, it didn't seem on top on the surface as great. But then a few months later, I understood, God removed something out of my pathway so that I can walk towards what was really meant for me, right? So don't focus on, if you lose out on something, don't focus on the loss because you're wasting your own time. Focus on the opportunity that's standing in front of you. Even if you cannot see it, there's opportunity there. But your perseverance is based on your perspective of who you are, where you're at, and where you're trying to go. So make sure that you're in tune and aligned with yourself so that nothing rocks you, not even the people closest to you, the people that love you the most. Nothing is supposed to stop you from doing what you're supposed to do for you.
Yeah. I'm taking assign your purpose to your pain. We need an Aldis Hodge meme with that artist. No, that is awesome. I mean,
bars.
I got an LP dropping. I got my first single dropping. Everybody on there, you know what I'm saying? Jay-Z and them, Nas and them, is crazy.
Oh, God. What about you, Mike? What do you have to say to youth coming up?
Yeah, one of the big things I think is like recognizing that nothing happens to you, it happens for you. When it comes to anything that you're passionate about, that's always going to be the thing that drives you. You can aim for like a job that, such as myself, you can aim for a job that, on paper sounds like it's a lot of money, right? But at the end of the day, if you are lacking passion for it, you're kind of dooming yourself to fail, or you get that job anyway, but you feel like you're in a perpetual hell. Whereas if you are truly passionate about something, the money's always going to be there. And it doesn't matter what, wage we tell you, like if you're saying like, oh, well, this job on paper says that you can make $100,000, $200,000 a year. Your passion could drive you to make millions based on that one talent. So I think that those are the two things that I'll really focus on, is just like really making sure that you're passionate and following the voice that's within. because I think sometimes it's easy to hear like the outside talk, let it influence you, but you just really have to dial into yourself and allow yourself to just kind of steer your own way, not letting someone else steer you, because they don't know you as well as you know you.
Awesome. And Phil, take it home, slide into third base.
I love talking to students. So the main thing that I tell students all the time is to be a self-starter. There's a lot of classes that I feel like, especially like, I think it's generational, that they don't teach anymore. I was really lucky to have stuff like, basic stuff like typing and, business classes, like how to present yourself, dress up when you go to an interview, bring a sack, like all that stuff, all the old school stuff, right? So I think when I think about being a self-starter, it's about, if you don't have any work to do, your boss or whoever is in charge should not be coming to you to look to give you something. You should have already found something to do. That's the first thing. And if you can put that in your head, that's with everything. That's for looking for a house, looking for a job, looking for anything. It's like constantly being on it is the first thing. So I'd say self-starting is super important. And then also immersing yourself within what you love to do no matter what. So I think Mike and Aldis both kind of spoke to that, but it's like saying, if I want to be an artist, bare minimum, I'm not going to take some random job at Starbucks. I'm going to work at an art studio, or I'm going to work at an art store. Anything to just be around it all the time. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So I think that that's kind of how you look forward. So it's like, and then also building like-minded groups of people, right? Like you are who you are around, right? So I like to keep my circle pretty close, but I like my circle to also be people that are like-minded, right? That want to aspire to something greater, that, want to, attain wealth, like just all those things. Like those are the things you put around yourself to make sure that you're always focused. If you've got friends that aren't doing anything, you won't do anything. Like it's kind of that type of deal, right? So I think it's immersion, but also just really kind of like looking forward and saying like, okay, I want to be in costume. So I need to look up fashion. I need to look up this. I need to look up terms. I need to look up all the things. I need to study my anatomy. Like it's just an overwhelming sense of it. And then getting a group of people together that are like-minded. If you're in a place that doesn't have that, you have the internet. Go online, find places like 9B, find community, build a community with Zoom with your friends and just be like, hey, today we're going to work on this idea, or we're going to film something or whatever, even if you're far apart. That's the key component, I think, to being successful.
Also,
I'm lucky to have it. Go ahead.
Having something that he just said, actually, which makes a lot of sense, is I know a lot of the times people, especially when it comes to arts, they always wonder, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And I always say that the thing to really recognize is do the thing that you do in your spare time. When no one's watching you, when no one's looking, if someone's telling you draw environments or draw sets, but you find that you're drawing characters in your sketchbook, you're probably a character designer, so like really focus on what you naturally want to do. And usually that's where your passion lies.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that is a good
overextend themselves.
takeaway.
Yeah.
I mean, you all are so blessed to have found your passion, to bring other people into the fold with it, to create, and to leave a legacy. You're leaving a legacy for us as the first Black concept studio. So I thank you for what you do. I look forward to all the stuff. Now I know who the hell you are. I didn't know. Like now I'll be looking at the credits, like Ruth Carter. Then I'm gonna look for Phil Boutte, and this is exciting. I'm really honored to have you. So thank you for being a part of SABIFF 2022, and continue to create.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Right.
Thank you.
You all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we are looking forward to more things in the festival. Be well. Take care.
Thank you. Enjoy the festival, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy.